On this week's Prequel episode, we follow up on our 101 Dalmatians listener polls and preview the short story The Nutcracker and the Mouse King and the film Barbie and the Nutcracker. Hello and welcome back to This Film Is It, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. We have quite a bit of follow-up and some previewing to get to, so we're going to get right into our patron shoutouts.
I put up with you because your father and mother were our finest patrons, that's why.
We have 2.5, depending on how you count it, new patrons this week. First off, at the $15 Academy Award-winning level, Nathan B. Thank you, Nathan, for joining and supporting us at that $15 level. Make sure you sent in your request. If you haven't yet, did they?
I have not seen any messages.
Obviously, we'll make sure we see it. But if you haven't sent that in, make sure you get your recommendation, your request for what you would like for us to talk about at that $15 level. And thank you for supporting us. We also have somebody rejoining at the $5 level, Laura Pinheligan. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. But I didn't see this originally. Katie mentioned this because it came through as a notification that you joined at the $5 level. And what it turns out it was the way Patreon displays. Patreon's a nightmare. Everybody who uses Patreon all says this. The way they do information tends to be just kind of counterintuitive and annoying. But we got a notification saying you subscribed at the $5 level. But it turned because you had been a patron previously and had to cancel and then rejoined. It didn't show up. It's not showing up in the list of like our most recent patrons when I actually go to the audience tab and look at our patrons, which is how I insert the new patrons and the recurring patrons into the show notes. So it's possible. Anyways, the point of this is if you are somebody else who has rejoined, we'll be happy to give you a shout out again if you dropped off for a bit and then you rejoin. There's just a chance we may have missed some people because I didn't know that Patreon didn't show us people that were rejoining. Again, it shows you in one place, but not in the other. It's confusing and it's dumb. But anyways, if you have rejoined and we haven't given you your recent shout out for rejoining, just shoot us a message and we'll say thanks.
And we're happy to have you back. Yes,
and we're very happy to have you back. Hope you're enjoying that bonus content. And then finally, I just mentioned them because why not? There's only like 5 of them. If we get thousands of them at some point, I may not read everyone. But we have one new free patron, Gathra or Gothra. Probably Gathra, I would imagine, with that spelling. But anyways, thank you all for supporting us, following us, all that good stuff. Our Academy Award winners, the best of the best, our $15 patrons are Nathan B., joining the ranks for the first time, Vic Hammer, Matilde, Steve from Arizona, Paul, Jeff Niederhofer, Teresa Schwartz, Ian from Wine Country, Winchester's Forever, Kelly Napier, Gray Hightower, Gratch, Just Gratch, Shelby's in her Capybara era, That Darn Skag, V. Frank, and Alina Starkov. Thank you all for supporting us and continuing to support us. We really appreciate it. Katie, let's see what the people had to say about 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Well, on Patreon, we had 4 votes for the movie and 2 for the book. Shelby's in her Capybara era said, "This movie was one of my favorite Disney classics growing up, so it was interesting to revisit it as an adult. This experience was the opposite of some of the picture book adaptations you've talked about in the past. The movie was fine. It was nice to look at. I liked Cruella, and that's the movie."
Those are pretty much my feelings on the movie, to be fair.
As an adult, I appreciated how much more we got of the world and the characters in the book. There's definitely some problematic parts, but the side characters were more interesting and fleshed out, and I liked the Odyssey stuff. The world of the book felt lived in, while the movie felt very bare bones in comparison. So for that reason, I picked the book. I did not catch that the dog at the end who suggested killing Cruella was a cute little Staffy. I'm not sure when the narrative about pit bulls and similar breeds like Staffies changed to the violent breed stereotype, but I feel like it was after this book. I'm not sure when that started going around.
That's a complicated topic that I would not need to get into on this show because there's a lot of political discourse about that. I think there's a lot of that is tied into racism.
Yes.
And it has a lot to do with a lot of that kind of thing. when those dogs were seen as like regal hunting dogs that rich white people owned, they were fine. And then, it's more complicated. Again, I'm talking way out of my depth here. Point being, I know that there's a lot of weird.
Yes, it's a very complex and multi-layered topic of discussion.
Yes, because I know there's other people who are very insistent that it's actually no, these breeds are dangerous, like blah blah blah. I don't know. I'm not making an argument one way or the other. My point is that I know that it is mixed up in a lot of racism and weird stuff. And terrible stuff on top of whatever the underlying, actual nature of what is going on there is. Again, not wading into that topic right now because it's too complicated. But I think that has something to do with that turn in. I would imagine the turn in the sort of what you're talking about here, the cultural conception, has a lot to do with racism, as it tends to in the U.S.
Charlene said, "This is one of the few movies we had on VHS when I was a kid, so I watched it a ton. Even back then, it wasn't a favorite, just what we happened to have. It's cute and charming, the song is catchy, and Cruella is iconic, and there's just not much else to it. If it wasn't so firmly rooted in my brain from repeat viewings, I imagine it'd be pretty forgettable."
That's, again, very similar to my feelings on the film. Looks like we're
but I do
common.
think that that's a kind of a fair assessment of that whole era of Disney.
That's true.
Like if it's not something that was beloved by you as a child, it's probably pretty forgettable.
I felt similarly about all of those. And now, to be fair, it's hard for me because I'm saying that about those era of Disney movies, but I'm comparing them to the era of Disney movies that I grew up watching. So of course,
right.
Now, again, I will say that I think some of the earlier stuff's maybe a little more iconic than that period of Disney stuff. Because I agree that my point is my feelings have been similar about Jungle Book,
Robin Hood,
Dalmatians. I imagine it would be similar for like the Aristocats or the other stuff from that period. But it's also a little tough because I have not revisited. We have not done like Cinderella or
we
Snow White or any of the like
classic
ones.
Yeah.
And I would be interested to see how I felt about those because again, although other ones that we have done, Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, are ones that I have a lot of nostalgia for that make me elevate that in my head put them above these movies, but I don't know how accurate, how objective that rating is. Or how objective it is that this particular period is like, worse maybe than those other two, like the classics versus the golden age. It seems to be the general consensus among people, but
I think I don't know that better or worse is
okay. Maybe that's not the right language.
Well, what I'm saying is though, but I think there is a general consensus among people who like Disney, people who like animation and film, that period of Disney was not the same type of like artistic output as other periods of Disney.
I guess that's what I mean when I say better or worse.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's not as highly regarded for its cinematic merit as Snow White, Cinderella, or moving forward,
the Renaissance,
Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, whatever.
Yeah, no, I agree. Our next comment on Patreon was from Mathilde, who said, "My absolute favorite version will always remain the Glenn Close movie, but in this case, I'm going with the animated movie over the book. The book was fun, but I too lost interest during the second half. Overall, it felt like a very niche, personal, weird world, which I can appreciate, but it didn't quite bring me along for the ride." That was pretty much how I felt about the book. It was weird and interesting, but it didn't quite pull me all the way in. I quite like the animation in the movie. The messy way the backgrounds are drawn is pretty appealing to me, and the character designs are delightful. I'm a cat lady through and through, but damn if those puppies are not the most adorable bunch. I love Roger too. He's hilarious, and the way he puffs at his pipe kills me every time. If anything, I have to give it to the movie for the immortal line, "I'm tired and I'm hungry, and my tail is froze, and my nose is froze, and my ears are froze, and my toes are froze," aka my motto for every single winter up here in Canada.
Yes, fair enough. Canada do be like that.
And Steve from Arizona said, "For me, I'm going to have to go with the movie on this one. Of course, I love anything with dogs, so this movie and The Fox and the Hound and Oliver and Company rank as my fave Disney movies." Those are some obscure picks, Steve.
He did clarify fave Disney animated movies.
Disney animated movies.
I don't know if he has others that are favorites that are live action.
I would presume so, based on that clarification. I did read the synopsis for The Twilight Barking, and it sounds like such a left turn. It's very similar to the time Steven Spielberg was going to make E.T. 2 and turn E.T. into Rambo, and we're assuming the Rambo 3 version.
I don't know anything about ET2 or
I don't know anything about
any
that.
of that lore. So.
Yeah, no, nor do I. I didn't know there were talks for an ET2 at one time.
It doesn't surprise me.
No.
But I've never heard anything about that. That's really interesting. I'm also ET's one of those like weird holes in my.
Same. Yeah.
I have seen it for sure. Like I know I've seen it as a kid, if not once, if not multiple times. But I don't have. It was never a movie as a child that I had strong feelings for.
I don't have any strong memories of it.
I think I only watched it once or twice. So.
Steve went on to say, also, on a silly Disney canon note, the Brits love dogs more so than Americans. Considering a large swatch of AKC breed dogs hail from England, it wouldn't be too ridiculous that Scotland Yard would get involved in a puppy kidnapping ring. Plus, this sentiment is also heavily implied in the old movie The 3 Lives of Thomasina, where the father is a respected veterinarian and the most intense scene is when he saves a blind man's seeing eye dog. Anyway, just my fun take.
I guess that could be true.
Yeah.
Especially back in, ye olde times where they had weird... It's not ye olde times. It's the 50s
It's mid-century.
Mid-century. But, it might as well be ye olde times.
Yeah.
We didn't have... They had kind of different,
I'm not even going to pretend to know that I know what Scotland Yard's business is. So,
no.
For all I know, they solve puppy kidnappings all the time.
All the time.
Over on Facebook, we had 4 votes for the movie and 0 for the book. Terry, who some of our listeners may remember is my mom, said, so I couldn't remember if I'd ever read the book, but suspected that I had at some point. I haven't had time to search it out, but I plan to now, because while listening to Katie talk about the book, I realized that I had indeed read it. In fact, I think I probably read it multiple times during my childhood. It's probably still on a bookshelf in my mom's basement. We could look over Christmas. We could do that. I gave my vote to the movie, mainly for nostalgia's sake. Growing up, I didn't get to go to the theater for a movie very often, but I did see this one at the movie theater. I was looking at Disney re-release dates, and I'm pretty sure Lady and the Tramp was the first big screen movie I saw, and 101 was the second. My dad, Katie's grandpa, and a Disney movie fan, if there ever was one, took me and some of my siblings to see this. If memory serves me, we snuck in popcorn that my mom popped and bagged up for us. Not sure how we pulled that off. This is getting long, so I'll wrap up. While I know that I really enjoyed the book, for the sake of my dad, the most kind and loving person to ever walk this earth, and for the sake of Cruella de Vil, the greatest Disney villain ever, I'm giving this one to the movie.
Putting down the dropping the mic on that one. The greatest Disney villain
I honestly
ever.
had no idea that my mom had such strong feelings about Cruella de Vil. I mean, I'm not surprised, but I didn't know that.
I mean, I think she definitely ranks up there for sure in terms of iconic, greatest villains. I there's others, but I think she's got to be top. Definitely top 10, probably top 5. Maybe top 3. If you were polling people, I think she would rank very highly. Makes sense.
Over on Twitter, we had 6 votes for the movie and 1 for the book. Kelly Napier said, my vote is firmly for the movie this time. I'm oddly fond of this era of Disney movies, despite how sloppy they can be. 101 Dalmatians, here for it. Sword in the Stone, love it. The Aristocats, chef's kiss. But it's more than just that. There were a couple things in the book that really bothered me, the biggest being the erasure of any agency Mrs. had for herself. She isn't even given a name. And, as you referred to in the episode, she's consistently portrayed as a stupid individual who can't figure out anything for herself, while partnered with a male dog who's portrayed as the golden standard of all dogs. Even her sister wife, Perdita, is given more agency, not only because she has a name, but because she's given worth within the book by acting as a nursemaid to the extra puppies. That being said, they then leave her behind and forget all about her. I also didn't like the scene where they destroy all of Cruella's furs. I understand why it was there for the plot, but I don't think having a scene of pure revenge in a kid's book is a great idea. Are we teaching kids that the best way to get back at someone who's wronged you is to take away the most important thing to them? I don't love that messaging. I did love Cruella's cat in the book, even more so that she just invited herself to live with the family at the end. Very cat behavior.
Yes, no, I agree about the cat thing.
Mhm.
I don't know.
The furs. I mean,
The
I
furs
see
thing,
what
I
you're.
think-
I see what you're saying. I totally see what you're saying. But because it is furs,
Yes.
I'm kind of like,
I think the distinction there comes in, like I agree that having like a scene of pure revenge in a kid's book might not necessarily be the best idea, depending on the context. But I think the context here is partially what makes it maybe. Again, I haven't read the book, so I don't know. But just reading this, I think I disagree because your next sentence: are we teaching kids that the best way to get back at someone who's wronged you is to take away the thing most important to them? I agree that's not probably the best thing to teach kids. That being said, when the thing you're taking away is, or destroying in this instance, is furs, is like
skins.
the
Skins
hides of dead animals
Yeah.
that she murdered, it's a little different. Like removing that from a person, like the thing they love, if the thing they love most in the world is an awful thing, then it's morally justifiable, at least to some extent, depending on the situation and stuff, to remove that thing from a person.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think like context-wise within the book, I think you could debate whether or not it's an act of pure revenge. I think it is for the cat.
Right.
In that like moment in the book, but there's also a lot of conversation prior to that about being concerned that she's just going to restart her Dalmatian fur farm.
Yeah.
So, and then them destroying the furs causes her business to tank, and she's not able to go on to do that.
Yes, and I think there's an argument to be made that in that case, yes, destroying them is actually like a morally justifiable and good thing, and even in a kid's story, that's probably not a terrible thing to portray, potentially. Again, without having read it myself and knowing exactly how it plays out, but it sounds like from what you're saying, Katie, that I would agree with that. I think it's probably fine, because I do think that I don't think that revenge is necessarily good. And again, what you're talking about sounds more like less like revenge and more like destroying the means of a bad destroying the means that this lady has to continue doing evil things, or these already evil these already evil gotten products, and then destroying them, removing them, etc., and thus removing her ability to capitalize on them on this sort of morally bankrupt fur trade is justifiable. Again, I think probably.
Yeah, no, and again, Kelly, I totally see what you're saying here.
I do, because I agree.
But I think there is like an interesting like moral philosophical debate to be had here.
Yeah, and I'm kind of approaching it from not having the context for it, so it's a little tough to discuss for me. But again, just kind of widely, abstractly, I agree. Revenge, not the best, not a great
message,
but given the context of what it sounds like this story is doing, I probably think it's either okay or maybe morally good. It's less justifiable, like, because it's the same thing like that we talk about in lots of stories. It's like, yes, killing people is bad. You should not kill people, but also sometimes you have to murder your oppressors to escape, the bonds of like whatever.
We do talk about that oddly a lot.
Yes, but like, there is times where, yes, killing people is bad, but if you're a slave and you kill your slave owners, I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily to have.
I don't think you're a bad person in that scenario.
Necessarily. Like, again, it depends a lot, but like, yes, generally that's a morally acceptable and maybe morally good thing to do. So it just, it's, again, maybe you don't have again, it depends on what level it is in a kid's story. I understand there's like, I don't necessarily want a story for like little kids about like murdering your oppressors. I think it's not necessarily the right thing for little kids. I just want to clarify that. But there are age ranges, and as we progress, there's like, and again, this is destroying furs is not, if they had murdered her like as revenge, that as
the Staffy wanted to do.
Right. I think that might be maybe veering a little too far into, and like we haven't hit the point where that is acceptable or, makes sense for an audience of this age range. But there is a point where, sometimes you have to do bad things to bad people. Sometimes. I mean, unfortunately, which it didn't have to, but sometimes.
All right. So over on Instagram, we did not have any comments, but we did have 5 votes for the movie and 1 for the book. And then in its first "This Film is Lit" appearance, I did post a poll on Threads. So we're gonna post there occasionally. I can't connect Threads to the automatic like posting social media management software that we use at this time. So we're not going to post everything on Threads because that's going to get annoying for me.
Right.
But I will post like polls and stuff there.
Some of the main things.
Yeah, some of the main things. But we did have 5 votes for the movie and 1 for the book. No comments. But if you are a Threads enjoyer, follow us
dozens
there.
Of us. Dozens. I say us. I have not logged on to that one yet.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you have an account because you automatically have one if you have like an Instagram or whatever. But yeah. No comments on Threads again, but maybe in the future. So the winner of our listener poll this time was the movie with 24 votes to the book's 5.
All right. Movie crushed it.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really surprise me.
I'm sure far more many people have seen the movie than read the book.
Absolutely. All right. We do not have a Learning Things segment this week because we had quite a few other notes and some other stuff to get to. But we do have our preview for The Nutcracker and the Mouse King.
In her first ever feature-length movie, Barbie comes magically to life. Barbie in the Nutcracker. A spectacular adventure of music and dance.
The Nutcracker and the Mouse King is a short story. Short is relative here. I think it's around 100 pages. Written in 1816 by Prussian author E.T.A. Hoffmann. The story was originally published in Berlin as a part of the collection Kinder Märchen. I'm not
Kinder
even,
is just children.
Yes, Kinder, and then I'm assuming that I don't know what that other word is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Kinder Märchen, children's stories, and then reprinted in Hoffmann's own.
Oh, that might just be children's stories.
Maybe
be like the German for Märchen or whatever might just be stories.
Quite possibly. I don't know any German.
Because I mean, the way this is written looks to me like that's the direct translation.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
But I don't know.
Okay.
And then it was reprinted in Hoffmann's own first short story collection in 1818. And it was first translated and published in English in 1853. But before that, in 1844, it was actually translated into French by an author that we have previously discussed on this show.
I'm sorry. I just Googled the translation and it... Oh, wait, maybe I spelled it wrong. Hold on. Because that can't be... unless it has a different meaning in German.
Well, are you translating it in German?
Well, no, sorry. What I mean is like, unless the English words that it was giving me have a different... Okay, so it's... Wait, what is that? Well, because part of it is there's like there's an umlaut, not an umlaut. Is that an umlaut?
The 2 dots?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an umlaut or not. I think it is, but I don't know for sure. I'm not a language studier.
Okay, so Märchen is a story or tale. So yes,
okay.
It is. It looks. I assume this is a children's stories or children's tales or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Because initially when I Googled that, it said making babies. I was like, that cannot be it. Then the second time it said children marching. And I was like, wait, what?
Like,
but
maybe.
then I just looked up the Märchen word by itself, and it said stories or tales.
An interesting language.
I think it's children's stories. I think it is a direct translation, children's stories.
Probably.
Anyway, sorry.
Okay, so in 1844, I was translated into French by an author that we have discussed
Oh,
on here before,
Dumas.
a one Alexandre Dumas, and it was republished by him under the title The Nutcracker. So we got rid of And the Mouse King.
Yes.
And it was published actually as a retelling, not as a translation.
Nice.
With Dumas as the author, despite it being basically identical to Hoffman's version. And this is something that Dumas apparently did quite a bit. I can't remember if we talked about that when we discussed him. But apparently this was like a thing that he did.
Good for him.
Was do translations, retellings, quote unquote. But Dumas' version was actually used as the basis for the 1892 Tchaikovsky ballet, The Nutcracker, which is how I would suffice to say all of us probably know of The Nutcracker, with the exception that the character Marie is usually changed to Clara in subsequent adaptations. But while most film and television adaptations do use music from the Tchaikovsky ballet, they are still considered adaptations of Hoffman's short story.
That makes sense.
So,
because it's the story. It's that story.
It's that story.
And then, yeah.
But everybody knows it now because of the ballet.
Yes.
So I am going to be reading Hoffman.
Mm-hmm.
If I have time, I will also take a look at Dumas' version. That is a big if.
A big if.
a big if. It's Christmas week. I'm very busy. But I will definitely be reading E.T.A. Hoffman's version of this for this episode.
Cool. Well, now we're going to go ahead and talk. If you missed it on, before we get to it, if you missed it on social media, we had a different one that won the poll originally, but then we realized we couldn't watch it. The only way it existed was to order a DVD that wasn't going to be here in time. Not to mention, if we did that, very few of our listeners would ever have seen it, and not that you have to have necessarily. But point being, it doesn't really. It's like it's not lost media. Obviously, it exists out there, but there's probably like some pirated versions. And then again, you can buy the DVD. But we didn't realize that we would need to do that because it says on many search engines that like, oh, you can watch it on Apple TV or you can watch it on Broadway HD or whatever. But those are not the actual movie, which happens pretty often.
Unfortunately, yeah, it does.
Where like Google and other like where can you watch services will show you, especially when a movie has multiple versions.
Yeah, they
will show you, oh look, you can watch it, and then you click on the Broadway version. And it's like, oh, this is literally just the ballet. Like this
it's like a filmed stage version of the ballet. No, and I am really annoyed because when I was planning for us to do this episode, I know that I checked that all of the options were streaming in like multiple places. Yeah. Because I wouldn't have included it in the options.
Oh, and it was, by the way, it was Nutcracker in 3D / it has
The Untold Story.
Nutcracker, The Untold Story. Yeah. It was a Dakota Fanning one.
Yes. I wouldn't have put it in the options if we weren't going to be able to watch it, obviously. Yeah. And then when I went to fill in the notes for this, it came up nowhere. Yes. And I was like, perfect. Cool. Yes. Glad that one won.
Yeah. So which I think part of the reason it won is that it kind of had a semi resurgence lately on like YouTube and stuff because it's famously terrible. Mm-hmm. Like it's notoriously awful. And so I saw some YouTube channels recently had done like reviews of it and stuff. So I think that's part of why it was kind of people were aware of it. And one of the reasons it got some votes and stuff. But we weren't able to do that one this time, but we are the one that ended up winning our runoff poll, our quick secondary runoff poll that we did over the last day and a half is Barbie in the Nutcracker. So let's go ahead and learn a little bit about that now.
Barbie in the Nutcracker. Yours to own on video.
Barbie in the Nutcracker is a 2001 film, actually released on October 2nd, 2001, a month after 9/11, kind of in the wake of, it's an interesting time for movies to release, but.
That's an interesting time for like a Christmassy movie.
Seems a little early.
Like. Yeah, seems a little early.
Yeah. The film is directed by Owen Hurley, who did Casper's Haunted Christmas reboot. Worked on Reboot, which is a great show if you haven't seen it. Canadian like CG crazy show I remember watching as a kid. Beast Wars Transformers, another great animated show. Barbie in Swan Lake and Barbie is Rapunzel. So two of the two that came right after this, the two Barbie movies I believe that came right after this in the animated Barbie films. It was written by Linda Inglesiepen and Hilary Hinkle, who looked to be a writing partnership because they had almost all the same credits for writing that I noticed, including Mistletoe Over Manhattan, The Christmas Elves, Tom Thumb Meets Thumbelina, as well as a handful of other animated kind of films and that sort of thing. And with a screenplay by Rob Hudnut, who was primarily producer, but also wrote Barbie as Rapunzel and the Mighty Max TV show. He was a writer on the Mighty Max TV show that aired briefly in the 90s. Another toy-based animated property. The film stars Kelly Sheridan, who is the voice of Barbie from 2001 to 2010. This was her first film. And then 2012 to 2015. Also pretty well traveled as like an anime dubber, has like a lot of credits in animes and stuff like that. Kirby Morrow, who also did a lot of anime. In fact, these two, Kelly Sheridan and Kirby Morrow, I believe played the two leads in like Inuyasha, I don't even know the name of it. Some pretty prominent anime dubs. These two were like the main two voice actors.
Cool.
Tim Curry.
Love that.
The one name most people will recognize from this. I'm including all these names because I'm sure people who like animation, a lot of these people had lots of animation credits and voice acting credits. None of them stuck out to me, but I'm sure people know them. Peter Kalamis, Christopher Gaze, Ian James Corlett, Chantel Strand, Kathleen Barr, French Tickner, Alex Doduk, and Brett McKillop. The film has a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, but more on that later. No Metacritic score, and a 6.3 out of 10 on IMDb. So, as you mentioned, this is obviously based on the book and the ballet, Tchaikovsky's ballet. The choreography for this film was actually handled by the New York City Ballet, specifically their master-in-chief, Peter Martins. I assume he was at the time. I don't know if he still is the master-in-chief at the New York City Ballet. And the score for the film is based on Tchaikovsky's original score, and it was performed by the London Symphony Orchestra. The New York City Ballet was actually filmed for this movie via motion capture over the course of 3 days, and then their actual physical performance was translated directly into the animation. So the ballet you see in the film is motion captured from actual
ballerinas.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yes. And I think a lot of the human performances, from what I was seeing, were motion captured, whereas a lot of like other animals and creatures and stuff were animated, like more traditionally animated, where you're using like keyframes and etc. So from Wikipedia, according to Jennifer Twiner McCarran, who was the CGI producer at Mainframe, which is one of the CGI studios that worked on the film, and was a co-producer on the film, Mattel wanted, quote, a very soft and stylized look for Barbie, and they didn't want the character to appear or move like a doll, as she had in her brief appearance in Toy Story 2. Her hair received specific attention due to its importance to the character and the difficulty in animating it. Of this, McCarran said, quote, a hair rig was built so that when she, and rig here meaning within an animation software, a rig is like, it's hard to explain. And it's even, but like, a rig is like a thing that basically you design a way for the hair, like, it's like a model, essentially, that then you can move around and do stuff with to get realistic movement out of.
So it's like a specific part of the, like, program or code?
I'm out of my depth here.
Where's Conrad?
Yeah, for real. But like, I guess that my understanding of like maybe the easiest way to kind of explain it would be like kind of like a model. Like a rig was similar to like a model.
Okay.
So like if you're imagining like the Barbie character is her own like model, her hair would be like a separate thing, and sometimes it's called rigs, depending, and again there's different meanings.
So a model in the sense of like similar to how like in a stop motion film you have like a specific like character model, but the hair is its own separate model. Okay.
I kind of would be my a hair rig was built so that when she moved it wouldn't intersect with her body. Her hair was like a separate character with all the attention and care it received, end quote. So fun crossover with one of our bonus episodes from last month, 2 months ago, October, I guess. One of the dancers that they actually filmed for the motion capture was Benjamin Millipede. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. It's funny because I saw there was like 8 credited ballet dancers on Wikipedia of like who from the New York City Ballet that they motion captured for this film.
Yeah.
And like 3 of them had like Wikipedia links you could click on, and I just was like, oh. And I saw New York City Ballet, and I was like, I wonder. And I clicked on it, and the first 2, the people that are Barbie and the Mouse King weren't, like the 2 that were credited for like the 2 leads or whatever weren't anybody I recognized. But the third name, I clicked on it and I looked at him like, this guy looks familiar. And he didn't have in this movie, he didn't have a credit for like what he was. It just, he was part of the ensemble, I guess, or something. But he was the prince in Black Swan, who is the male ballet lead in that film.
Yeah.
So yes, like the guy, if you watch Black Swan, the guy who Natalie Portman's dancing with, like the whole movie.
Most of the time.
Is Benjamin Millipede, and he was motion captured for this film. So
interesting. Good for him.
He also did a lot of the choreography for Black Swan, from my understanding, which was 10 years after this. So he had probably moved up the ranks.
I was going to say that feels like he got promoted and moved on up.
Could be. So the musician that arranged the music for this movie, which again is based on the original Tchaikovsky score, was Arnie Roth, who is the violinist in Mannheim Steamroller.
Wow.
And then getting to some reviews, which again, I thought this was really interesting because as you will notice, or as you will remember, I said this film has a 20% Rotten Tomatoes, but these are reviews that are all on Wikipedia's review section, and there's quite a few of them, and they're like all positive. So I don't know if maybe the
20% seems a little harsh.
Well, and it also is a very round number.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that maybe for some reason they just didn't have a lot of... Now, to be fair, this is probably a direct-to-video.
Yes, all the Barbie animated movies
so that probably plays into it, but there are a bunch of reviews, and mostly positive. Again, I have some a couple negative, but I guess my point is that the reviews on Wikipedia were not 20% negative. They were like 80% positive-ish or something like that. So I'm just a little confused at the Rotten Tomatoes score there. It's again, my guess is that Rotten Tomatoes just doesn't have all of the actual reviews because it's a review aggregator. It doesn't always again, it's complicated. Or maybe these people weren't Rotten Tomatoes reviewers at the time. I don't know. Because again, it was 2001. Who knows? Point being, getting to some reviews. Karen James, writing for the New York Times, said, quote, "The film works well enough according to the undemanding rules of Barbie. With its adventures in fairyland and magical transformations, this is a diverting, inoffensively sweet tale for very small children." End quote. Writing for The Hollywood Reporter, Marilyn Moss praised the film, saying, quote, "Barbie is all gentle and generous and not afraid of a villain or two. The story is strong, the animation splendid, and the music and choreography delightful. The entire production is first rate." End quote. Writing for the Sunday Age, Rob Loewen called it unexpectedly charming. And then for the South Florida Sun Sentinel, Scott Hetrick praised the film's story and the cast and the ballet performance, writing, quote, "It's hard to imagine any other 76-minute program, let alone any other version of the Nutcracker, that delivers as much adventure, fantasy, romance, humor, suspense, ballet, and classical music."
Wow, we're really building it up here.
I'll say.
Scott.
Yes. Joe Layden of Variety called, and these are more on the negative side. Joe Layden of Variety said it was, quote, "a generic fantasy adventure," end quote, saying that it was similar to The Wizard of Oz, writing, quote, "Pre-adolescent girls may be charmed by sugary sweetness of Barbie and the Nutcracker, but they shouldn't expect their parents or even slightly older siblings to join them for repeated viewings of this made-for-video trifle." End quote.
Oh, well, all right, Joe. Well, I will have you know that this was right in the era of when the first animated Barbie movies were coming out. My little sister was right in the target audience. And I will have you know, sir, that I did, in fact, join her for repeat viewings. Although I preferred Barbie as Rapunzel.
Okay. And then finally, writing for the New York Observer, Robert Gottlieb did not like the film's animation in contrast to some of the earlier reviews, saying of Barbie's appearance, or of all the characters' appearance, quote, "They're semi-rigid celluloid aliens with glazed expressions and enamel smiles," end quote.
I mean,
so he thought a little bit of an uncanny valley.
It's computer animation in 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fair. But those are the reviews. I didn't see an Ebert review for this one, unfortunately. But that is what we had. We wanted to remind you, you can do us a favor by heading over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Goodreads, any of those social media, or Threads at this point, any of those social media platforms. Give us a little follow, subscribe, whatever, so you can see our posts and interact. We'd love to hear what you have to say. You can also do us a favor by heading over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening to us. Drop us a 5-star rating and write us a nice review. And if you want to support us, obviously just head over to patreon.com/thisfilmslit. Give us some money and it'd be great. Katie, where can people watch Barbie in the Nutcracker?
Well, as always, you can check with your local library. I feel like there's a pretty good shot your library might have this one.
Yeah, it seems likely.
Or a local video rental store if you've still got one. It is not streaming anywhere with a subscription, but you can rent it for around $4 on Amazon, Apple TV, YouTube, or Vudu.
All right, there you go. That's going to do it for this getting ahead of myself. That's going to do it for this prequel episode. Yeah, I'm interested to see. I don't think I've ever watched a Barbie animated movie. My only Barbie movie experience is the Barbie movie from this year, which I did love, but it is maybe my favorite movie I saw this year.
The animated Barbie movies were definitely something that I watched a lot of in my preteen and early teen years, again because of my little sister.
Yep.
Who was Barbie of Swan Lake for multiple Halloweens.
There you go. All right. Look forward to that. And at not 1 week's time, this will be out. We're doing this, obviously, because we're recording this and you're hearing this, the week before Christmas. We're going to get this out before Christmas. Mm-hmm. So I imagine it'll be up the Saturday before Christmas.
That's what we're shooting for.
Yes. It will definitely be up before Christmas. It's just a matter of when exactly that happens. But yes, it should be Friday or Saturday before Christmas. So until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
keep reading books,
watching movies,
and keep being awesome.